So I'm excited to introduce tonight's speakers. Gabrielle, Sarah, can you join me on stage?
Hi.
Hi. I'm glad we have phones because it was so weird. My internet just fell through and now I'm here and I'm glad you're here. So Gabrielle Bluestone is a journalist and licensed attorney from New York, whose writing has appeared in a number of publications, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Sunday Times Magazine, and Esquire. She's also the Emmy-nominated producer of Netflix's Fyre and the associate producer of Different Flowers, which is a winner of the 2017 Kansas City Film Fest musical prize, or festival prize, sorry. A lot of fests in that title. Today's event is about her new book, Hype, which I have right here. And I highly recommend everyone go get immediately. To guide the conversation tonight, I'm excited to introduce Sarah Hagi, who is a Toronto-based writer, and her work has appeared in places like the Globe and Mail, Hazlitt, GQ, the New Yorker, The Cut, and more. And as of 2 days ago, she will be joining Gawker as a contributing writer. So congratulations, Sarah.
Thanks.
Enough from me. Thank you for hosting this and take it away.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Jorge, for asking me to be here. It's cool because I'm in Toronto, but I'm also in Vancouver right now. Gabrielle, this is so fun to read because I spend so much time online, much like you. I mean, that's the nature of culture writing, but also just, like everything that I've been reading about was just kind of like condensed in this book, which is like my favorite kind of thing, where it's just like online, but in my hands. And I felt like there was such a wonderful thread between like how our culture kind of got to this point of these scammers existing and being able to pull these things off. And Fyre Festival, like a lot was pulled off before the actual, like I feel like I watched the documentary, I read your stories, but it was kind of like just thinking so much about like, wow, so much had to happen for this to actually, exist. It's so crazy. But anyway, I'll start with my first question. Okay, so you started off really explaining how hard it was to get the initial like Fyre Festival story published, how you were like, guys, like this is a real thing, like something crazy is happening, and how you really had to push for it. And it almost feels like that wouldn't happen now, only because the Fyre Festival story was so big and we've kind of become addicted to these scams. But I guess, what was that like? Like, what did you see in this story, if you can go through it, that you were just kind of really attracted to it and it turned into this huge thing?
Yeah, well, so I first found out about it, I think the same way most people did, which was on social media. And, just seeing the promo video for it with like all the famous models and, the private island and the jets, it didn't strike me as anything that crazy, because I feel like social media and especially influencer culture had been really emphasizing that kind of like conspicuous consumption lifestyle. And so it didn't like seem that, out of left field that somebody might be marketing that. I didn't really like look that closely at it though. I would have, it was like Coachella, right? Like something that seems cool, but I wasn't tripping over myself to get a ticket. But then somebody I went to high school with started posting all these like details on his Instagram about, all the cool perks that were coming with his artist pass and how it's going to be the party of the year. And that was when I was like, oh, like, am I missing something? So I went and looked it up. And that was when it like started to make no sense, because it really, you didn't have to be, like an investigative reporter to see that something was like very off. Like within 30 seconds of Googling, there were, people complaining. Their website looked like super like amateur. Like there were just, they were talking about these crazy lodging packages in this island, but you couldn't find a picture of it anywhere. And on their website, it was all just like artist renderings, like drawings of what it was going to look like. And this was like a month out. There were rumors that some of the artists hadn't been paid. I found out later they were two separate people, but one man who lives in the Bahamas and like saw this thing happening, made a website to warn people. And another guy, Calvin Wells, who has been, revealed himself. He appeared in both documentaries and is quoted extensively in the book. Created a Twitter account to warn people. So like just Googling Fyre Festival turned up all these red flags, but everyone was treating it like it was, you know, going to be this legendary thing. And like legacy media was enforcing this, right? Like Vogue has since deleted the reference from the article. Unfortunately, the URL is still Fyre Festival, but Vogue was like hyping it up as something you absolutely had to get tickets to. Like Vanity Fair had an article calling it like the party of the summer. And so the more that I like investigated it, the more I was like, holy shit, like this is a total breakdown of, you know, everything that should have stopped this from happening. Like the influencers should have been clear that they were getting paid a lot of money to make it seem like they were involved. Like the media should have been investigating it. People who were buying tickets should have navigated off of Instagram and onto their actual website, and they might have realized that there was like nothing there to buy. And so I kind of, once I got Vice, my editors, once they saw the cheese sandwich, then they were like, oh, that's what you were talking about? Like, yes, it's published. And luckily we kind of had something pre-written. So if you want to be technical about it, BuzzFeed actually did beat us because they posted like a roundup listicle of all the amazing tweets about this thing, but we had the first reported out article. And as it kept going, like I just realized the bigger story here was like why it worked so well and less what had actually happened.
Yeah, I mean, like there was so, again, like the scope of it is so insane of, you know, exactly what you said, all the coverage it was getting, all the big names like attached to it, and like, you know, like the orange whatever square things, like it was just like this whole, like it was just full smoke and mirrors. And one thing that I really like about the book is that you kind of tie in like the whole, like, you know, how vapid like online culture is in this way, and that we all participate in, of, you know, like this is how my life is, this is how I want my life to look. And I feel like it's something that we've talked about so much since social media became big and reality TV became big, of how everyone's kind of faking it. But there really is like a link of how Fyre Fest couldn't exist without, you know, Instagram SpawnCon culture and, you know, influencer culture. And can you just kind of expand on that, like just how that kind of came together just within your research?
Yeah, well, I think that I mean this intertwines. It's hard to know where to start this story, right? Because when social media migrated, I think from laptops to cell phones, right? We'd always had MySpace and you know, even before Facebook, what was it, Friendster? Like there was always social media. But once we all started having smartphones, and like once iPhone overtook BlackBerry and you were using these apps constantly, I think that's when everything like really changed for the worse. And so there are all these studies that show, you know, among social media users starting in like 2013, this like rise in negative effects. Like you feel lonelier, like you feel less about yourself, you get jealous, like unhappy, that feeling of FOMO. Like it's just like a very anxious experience because, you know, not only can you see the pictures of what everyone's doing, but like you're seeing it in real time, everything that you're missing out on, or like everything everyone else is doing. It's kind of hard not to want to keep up with the Joneses in that sense. And then it became this like really show-offy kind of thing, especially in influencer culture, where everyone is showing how rich they are, and like all, you know, everyone's on private jets, and you know, the people that advertised the Fyre Festival weren't just beautiful models, they were also some of the most followed people on the platform. And everybody who's following them wants like entree into that lifestyle. So all of a sudden they were saying like, oh, you want to come on a boat with like a bunch of us? Here's how you do it. Buy a ticket right here. And then, you know, there's that element of FOMO. And I think that if you think really critically about it, I know I'm certainly guilty of this, but occasionally things become more important because of the way you can portray it than how you actually experienced it, right? So like maybe you go to like a party or a concert and like it's fine, but you take a cool picture and that elevates the whole experience. You know, you're doing it for the gram, that makes it worth it. Like I talked in the book a little bit about the rise of these like experiential museums where you can like go to the ice cream museum.
A museum of ice cream. I was like, what is that even?
Yeah, and like just take pictures, and even like the legitimate art that has become popular in recent years is stuff that you can take pictures in, whether that's like the rain room or the Kusoma stuff. It's like things that will look good on your grid. And it's, you know, it's been a slow, insidious thing where I think we've started to prioritize how we're going to present it to other people more than how we're personally experiencing it ourselves. And so the Fyre Festival was this like perfect storm of that. And, you know, I really truly believe that if they had gotten a couple bands on stage, or if like some semblance of a festival had happened, that everyone would have gone along with it rather than admit that they were miserable and, you know, had their money stolen. People would have found a way to take a good picture and post it.
Yeah, it is really, that is really something to think about, just like the, like truly like the whole like doing it for the gram thing that like, you know, everyone's been saying on as a joke, but it really is like, it does elevate these experiences. And I guess it's like, what, like, you know, someone like Billy McFarland, who like, just kind of going back to scammers, who really kind of failed upwards into creating something like, you know, this wasn't his first scam or like his first, you know, failed venture, and he was just able kind of to do it again. And you mentioned this whole thing about rule breakers, like someone like Elon Musk, or, you know, we have Elizabeth Holmes, who knows what's going to go on with her, but she was able to get billions of dollars from very legitimate investors over something that wasn't real. And how we're so invested in this idea of putting money into things that truly aren't real. They don't exist. Like something like, you know, I'm just thinking about Clubhouse, even like, you know, everyone's like, we got to have another Clubhouse. And now everyone's like, well, Clubhouse sucks. No one's on Clubhouse. So what is it that makes like one certain type of scamming so okay? You know, if we're thinking of, you know, investors, or, you know, even how something like Theranos started out versus someone like Billy McFarland, who's kind of in jail now over, I mean, like he created a fake persona of something that could have existed, you know, like, I guess like where's the line?
Yeah, I think if it hadn't been such a giant, you know, social media like spectacle, he probably wouldn't have been in that much trouble. I mean, this is a guy who was out on bail for a set of felonies and committed a second set of felonies, and he got, you know, 6 years total. But you know, it is like the culture, you know, Fyre Festival wasn't his first venture. He started with like this Reddit, Google Circles knockoff hybrid that he started in college, and he managed to convince people to give him hundreds of thousands of dollars for it because he was good at marketing, right? He was able to successfully market himself as somebody who could speak to a millennial audience, and that was valuable to the people in the tech space. And I think that that's, like, as you said, that's why people like Elon Musk, why he's thought of as, you know, the most brilliant guy in the world. He's brilliant because he's good at marketing. This is a guy who turned, you know, he sells it as a hyperloop, a futuristic way of travel. It's like a little tunnel for Tesla. Like there's nothing, you know, spectacular about it at all, except for the language that's used. Adam Newman of WeWork turned an office subleasing company into like a global spiritual revolution. And this stuff is encouraged because it makes people give them more money. So investors love it. They don't care if you're bullshitting, you know, the VCs love it because they're going to make money on their investments just from fees, whether the company does well or not. Like, it's crazy to me that Uber is thought of as this, you know, unicorn when it has never turned a profit. Like, what?
It is, yeah.
So like that, you know, it really made me start, like, I question, like, am I crazy? What am I missing here? That we are just not talking about what we're actually talking about. You know, we're having discussions about something completely different without acknowledging that, you know, the marketing bears no basis in reality to the product.
Yeah. And I mean, what do you think makes it so mysterious in that sense where, you know, we take Ubers all the time, or at least we did when there were places to go, or, you know, like people, again, like someone like Elon Musk is so revered, and then you breaking it down into it being like, well, this is just really great marketing. This isn't necessarily this amazing thing. I guess, like, what, I guess it's kind of like, what are we missing here? Like, what is the general public missing, where it's so easy for these smoke and mirrors to kind of go up constantly, and for people to be fooled into thinking someone's a genius just because they're very savvy in how to talk about things.
Well, I think it's, if you take a step back and look at it from like a bird's eye view, I think it's the same things that allowed the Fyre Festival to thrive, right? You have the right influencers or famous people endorsing it or signing on. In the case of Elon Musk, I kind of go into this in the book too, but I spoke to a tech writer who was, working for a popular digital media site. And because Elon Musk articles were performing really well on Facebook, and because there were a lot of like tech fanboys who wanted to read uplifting Elon Musk news, they were kind of like forced into writing these cheerleader articles in the same way that, Vanity Fair was hyping up the Fyre Festival. Mm-hmm. It was like to cater to an audience or an SEO element of it. I have totally just lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry.
No. I mean, it really is like just such a vast, like there's just so much to it, and it's like so ingrained in our, like kind of like our everyday life, where a new thing pops up every once in a while, and there's like a new billionaire and a new like, like, wow, look at this genius who, and then like Elizabeth Holmes was on the cover of magazines. She was always like, there were so many quotes, her Twitter's still up, of like all the events she used to do and everything, which to me is just like its own crazy thing. And like, I guess kind of going back to how, I guess how much this is like the fire, like again, from a bird's eye view, like how Fyre Fest was able to happen because of how this all works. Mm-hmm. Would something like, could anything change fundamentally from people? We keep getting fooled by these people in a sense. And it's kind of like, why does it keep happening? Which is something that you figure out in a sense, or you're trying to get through in the book. But yeah, I guess I'm just wondering, like, especially you're done writing it, like you've had a lot of time to think about it. Like, why does this keep happening?
It's the same pattern over and over, right? Like Elizabeth Holmes had the fawning New Yorker profile, and she had Henry Kissinger and the Walmart family. And once you have like, a big name influencer, people are not going to think too critically about it. They're going to join up because they see other people. And this is like kind of unfortunately human nature. I think a lot about the Solomon Asch experiment from the 1950s, where he put a bunch of people in a room and showed them two lines and then asked them to pick a third line that looked most like the first two. But there were, plants in the audience who were instructed to pick the most obviously incorrect answer. And 75% of the test subjects picked the wrong answer too, because like everyone else was doing it. So I think, unfortunately, like the onus is on the consumer and on, the individual to be a little cynical, I think, about what we're seeing, what we're reading. And it really goes against everything that we've been set up for. Like, I think we have been primed more than ever to be scammed. And part of that is like the way that culture is changing, right? Like you're following all your friends on social media, most people. But you're also following brands that look exactly like your friends, and you're following celebrities who, each of their posts look the exact same as the people you actually know and the people you actually trust. And I think it's like kind of easy to lose sight of what you know and what's just marketing when it's all constantly like a barrage like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's really something. And I think going even from like on a smaller scale, you talk a lot. Like a lot of your writing in this book has to do with influencers, and just like on this level where it's kind of like they're not necessarily hurting people. They're not going to go to jail for what they're doing, but there is this kind of scam element to it. And we were talking about this a bit before, but one of the like chapters that kind of got me, well, I was very interested in the influencer ones just because I'm like, oh my God, these people, like these are people I check in on. But someone like, Daniel Bernstein of We Were What, and just like you really, it's a very significant part in my opinion of the book, is like you go and you meet her and you're just kind of like, you see her place and you're like, I recognize this more than like my good friend's home. It's like, this is like a place, like I know that coffee table, I know this, I know that. And what was it, I guess, like, what is it like experiencing that firsthand, especially having done so much research, being so immersed in these stories as a journalist, and kind of seeing someone be able to like turn it on and turn it off, and like, could you just kind of speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, it made me, I literally write about this for a living, and it made me realize how naive I am, that I went into, meeting up with her and going to her house, expecting her to be just like she was online, right? Because I follow her life. I like see what she presents. I don't know. I took it to be real. And then getting there and meeting her and having, the experience with her that I detail in the book, and seeing all these stories afterwards where it's like all these things that I kind of just like assumed she had designed herself were actually taken from smaller brands who have these paper trails of her requesting the items and then, remaking them a month later. Like there's this whole divide between Instagram versus reality, and realizing how very different they were. And like you expect that, I profile celebrities occasionally, like you expect that what you see in the interview might not necessarily be who they are. But I think when it comes to an influencer who their whole job is to make you feel like you're part of their lives, it really it hits different.
Yeah. And I mean, even going to what you just said about, someone like her specifically, let's not bring Caroline Calloway into this because it's a whole different ballgame, but someone like her specifically, who she created a very successful business off what started off as her just taking photos of outfits. And she constantly gets called out for, I forget she exists, and I remember she exists because she's getting called out for doing something crazy. And how does that not stick? I guess I'm wondering, especially when, is it partially kind of an audience waiting for that drama? Is it out of genuine love? I guess it really made me think wow, if cancel culture, shouldn't she not exist for just, lying and ripping people off and that type of thing?
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it, I think, is she's amassed an audience of true fans on Instagram. I don't know if you saw, she recently tried to join TikTok, and that was not an audience that was very receptive to her messages. I think she had to turn off comments because she was getting dragged so incredibly thoroughly. There was very little of the, heart comments and I love this for you, babe, kind of stuff that you see on Instagram. But also part of it is I think people just don't care that much. Certainly, people are getting canceled, but scammers don't really, right? I think we kind of, as human, in human nature, have a little admiration at people who get away with it. They're called con artists for a reason. There was an artistry to it. But yeah, I don't know, it's kind of fascinating. Billy McFarland got 2 documentaries, a book, and 2 scripted series about him. Anna Delvey has 2 scripted series coming out. Jordan Belfort got played by Leonardo DiCaprio. These people really tend to fail upwards.
I'm just going to say to the audience, please feel free to add questions because we'll get to the question period soon. So if you just want to add any of those to the chat. Speaking of, exactly what you said, Adam Newman, there's a WeWork series coming out. Today it was announced that Jennifer Lawrence will be playing Elizabeth Holmes. Anna Delvey's, out of, I think she's out of prison, and there's going to be a Netflix series and all that kind of stuff. And I guess I'm wondering at this point, knowing how this kind of world is crafted, where, you get kind of a slap on the wrist in a lot of cases, and then you end up becoming, immortalized through film and television and, just people being based on you and all that kind of stuff. Do you think people are seeking it out now in a more purposeful way?
Yes. I watch a lot of reality TV, and so I was very curious about how that works. And so I actually talked to Nick Viall from The Bachelor and a couple of people who were explaining it's such an ingrained path now that people go into these shows knowing exactly what their role is going to be, and they are calculating, what their social media like worth will be what they know almost like down to like the exact number of like how many followers they'll have coming out of it and what kind of brand deals they're going to get and with who. And so, you know, I think people are like, you know, this whole thing of everything is performative now. Like even people, the backlash against it, you know, there's this like wave of authenticity and vulnerability, but it's all performative. Like everything is for the benefit of the audience. So even the people that aren't like doing, you know, malicious scams are still kind of scamming. Like everything is calculated in a way that I don't think life was before social media.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like thinking again of just the scale of something like Fyre Festival, just how big it became, how it was like dominate. Like I can't think of a bigger unifying internet event, honestly, other than like Rachel Dolezal. That's like the last time I can remember people being like so online and like, oh my God, this is happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, you know, how much bigger do you feel this will get? Like this kind of, like not to get too far off in a different direction, but you know, you see things like QAnon and like those, like, you know, these conspiracy theories really gaining mainstream momentum. And I guess like how much bigger do you predict these scams will get? Like could there be another Fyre Festival? Could there be like, or will people just get smarter in that sense?
I mean, I think 100% yes, there is going to be another Fyre Festival. Somebody is like planning their next huge product launch right now that we are all going to be melting down over on Twitter in a couple months. You know, I don't think it's ever, I think we're like through the looking glass at this point. You know, we're living in a world where no matter what you want to believe, whether it's a joke or serious, you can find evidence for it on the internet, whether that's on social media, on Reddit, in, you know, whatever press you want to read. Like you will find something to reinforce the way that you already want to feel. And you know, it's driven by scammers. Like QAnon started off as a joke, but you know, Donald Trump like wrung that thing out as much as he could. He was fundraising off of, you know, this bullshit, pardon my language, he was fundraising off of this, you know, this lie for months leading up to it. And then he was actually scamming his own followers with their donations too. There was like a big New York Times story a week ago about how he bankrupted like people that truly believed that the election had been stolen and were trying to help him by including a box that you had to uncheck because otherwise you were giving a recurring donation. Like it wasn't even, they didn't let you know. So people were losing thousands and thousands of dollars because the Trump campaign was charging them month after month. And so that was like actually, maybe it's obvious, but it was, you know, a revelation to me was realizing how much scammers really depend on triggering your emotions and like how much that plays into an effective online grift or offline too. You know, yeah, I spoke to someone whose friend had invested in Fyre and who warned him against it. But he wanted to be part of that like cool club. He wanted to say that he was taking the private jet and you know, going with the models. And so he lost like $5 million in that just because he wanted to associate himself with something cool. So.
Yeah, I mean, it is really crazy seeing how far people like how there's this way to just buy your way into this kind of coolness, you know, where you get the, you know, best pass and you'll have the true influencer experience. And it really is just kind of, again, like you have enough money to look cool type of thing. I mean, on a more personal level, I guess, like as you're writing something like this, does it, like, do you reflect a lot on like, I guess just not your own part in the scam culture, but just how, I guess like how your own social media presence exists? Like, you know, even just reading this myself, I'm like, why do I post anything? It's so other people can see it and like it and think I'm this way. And I guess it's like, I feel like that's a part of the reason why these things continue to exist is because we're all kind of doing it on a different level.
I am constantly thinking about that. And part of it is like, I'm sure I have an anxious personality, but I think it's also the nature of the beast where I'm like, how much do I want to share? Am I oversharing? Do I want my account to be private? Do I want it to be public? Is it work focused or should I put a little personality in there? Like I'm constantly unsure of how to behave in public on social media. Like, I don't know what the right answer. I mean, I think the right answer is like never tweet, never post, and that is, but none of us can do that, right? And like part of that is by design. You know, with these like notifications and you know, constant, like the algorithm constantly keeping you engaged. Like, it's literally set up like a slot machine so that you get, you know, a couple boring posts, and then there will be the one that you're excited for. So you're like constantly trying to see what's going to come up next. Like, it is designed to be addictive, to the point where I actually deleted Instagram from my phone for a little while, and I would find myself, you know, like waiting for the subway or whatever, and opening up the app that had slid over to take its place without ever once consciously thinking about it. So I'd like kind of wake up almost and find myself holding my phone with this random app open, and I couldn't understand how I had gotten there. It's really terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, it is so, yeah, it is so much. And I mean, once again, being so immersed in this world and like, you know, spending so long writing this book and reporting on it and continuing to report on it, is there anything about this world of scams that kind of, like, is there anything that can shock you at this point, is what I'm wondering?
I mean, at this point, no. But one of the things I guess that shocks me is how easy it is. If we really want to unplug from it, it really would be. You know, being in media and being active on Twitter, I'm sure you have on more than one occasion seen, you know, a verified blue check mark talking about what a hell site it is, yeah, or I can't believe we're doing this. And like, the most simple revelation to me was that it's this bad because of the people that I'm choosing to follow. Like, I have selected and designed this, you know, how, you know, starts that helps other people. Hell is my Twitter feed. Like, I curated this, and like I can undo it. So one thing I actually did was like, I unfollowed all the like kind of people that I was following because it was dramatic, or, you know, there was some like a scandal involved, and I like a Danielle Bernstein kind of thing, like just waiting to see what would happen next. And I unfollowed all the Kardashians and, you know, people selling a lifestyle. And I've been so much happier. Like, I follow like cooking accounts now, or like people making fires in the woods. Like, it's such a different and lovely experience.
Yeah. And I guess my last question is like, it kind of goes with that. Like, we spend so much time online. Like, I'm on my phone without knowing I'm on my phone. It's just like, I'm like, how is this in my hand right now? Like, when did I even pick it up? And I guess
that's with TV too. I find myself on my phone while watching TV, and I'm just like, I can't.
I know, and I'm like, if I'm able to just like focus on just one screen, I'm like, ooh, it's like reading a book. Like, I'm focusing on something. I guess, do you think people at this point know? I mean, one thing I kind of got from this was like, well, I guess like everything's kind of a scam. Like, everything online is to some level. Like, and I feel like the word scams feels so broad, and like everyone's always talking about scammers and grifters, but everything is kind of by design this kind of fake world. And do you think people are at this point just kind of know and don't care, or is there still like a part of it that really shocks people, where they're like, oh my God, like, how could this be happening right now?
I think it is kind of like the experience I had deleting Instagram, where I was still going to the site without thinking about it and buying into it unquestioningly, but there are those moments where it's like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And I think if we can listen to that voice in our head a little bit more, we might be a little better off for it. But you know, I worry that like this is life now. Like, we all have to perform in this like fake world that we've all opted into. I don't know, I guess just maintaining a healthy cynicism is the best thing we can do. And, you know, the very simple like thing that if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And just to, you know, tattoo it on our hands and try to remember.
So we shouldn't be going into any music festivals at any tropical islands.
I would avoid it for now.
All right. I mean, we do have one question here. I'm going to try and summarize it a bit. When someone does something that is unethical and then eventually benefits from it, what does that indicate about society in general? I guess let's just start there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is our society, right? Like the ends tend to justify the means. That's the thing that I like thought about a lot with Uber actually, because they had a legitimate playbook where they would deliberately drop into cities and towns and just completely ignore their laws and regulations and like fix it later. So they would actually, like, once they had enough riders in an area, they would start mobilizing them to vote on certain propositions or contract representatives, and they could do that because they were plugged into people's phones, and that was celebrated. Like that was thought of as like a, you know, an excellent business technique. So, you know, as unethical as we may feel it, I think it's encouraged, especially in the business arena.
And I guess on that note, you know, you mentioning that it's kind of encouraged in the business arena, is that kind of where people's, like, I mean, if someone wants to do a startup, like, maybe this is like too much of like a heady question, but like, is this, like, do you think any people start off in these things thinking like, oh, like I actually will try and make this, you know, like this app that'll make it easier for people to get rides, or like, you know, without, and like we've seen what Uber has done to the world, and yet like I can't stop using it, you know, like I can't stop, like I know, like you kind of feel stuck in this thing where you have no choice but to use it. And I guess I'm like wondering like what, yeah, again, maybe this is like too off topic, but like what are the, like, how does that fit into this kind of like scam world?
So, I mean, I deliberately like didn't get too much into this in the book because it's, you know, it's just a completely, I'd have to write a second book, but
yeah.
I think that this is capitalism. You know, I had no logo as like an inspiration in my head for this book, and just thinking about, you know, the justifications, I guess, that we have accepted in everyday life. I don't know. Now I'm getting lost in a heady.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, I mean, that's the thing about this book, is that I feel like it like opened up so many more doors to like just thinking about, like, again, like you have these very specific examples of, you know, Fyre Festival, which is woven throughout the book, and these like very specific kind of internet scam type of things. And I guess it's like, it's very easy for people to think this is just like an online thing. Like this isn't a part of my life. It just exists online. Like I'm not like, and again, it feels like people thought this was only happening to vapid people who are just online, or to women and that kind of thing. And I guess a big part of your book was showing that it isn't, this isn't happening in a bubble. This isn't like this small vacuum of an online world. Like it's affecting everyone.
Yeah, no, as a society, we have like collectively agreed to treat the indicators of success as equal or more important to any actual underlying success. Like if you can spin it, then, you know, you can live it. And you know, without like putting too blunt of a point on it, like I don't think it's any coincidence that we ended up with like Donald Trump in the White House, a man who scammed his way onto the Forbes list, which, by the way, the Kardashians did too. Like, you know, there's this game plan that people have been using over and over and over, and we keep accepting it. You know, I always, it's like funny, I think about like him pretending to be his own spokesperson and calling up Page Six and telling them that he had stolen Carla Bruni from Mick Jagger, and she had to like issue this like embarrassed denial that she'd never been alone with him. But you know, because he was so audacious about it and like so shameless, it worked. And I think that's like the real American archetype, is this utter shamelessness.
Yeah, I mean, even thinking about like something like the college admission scandal, like, and like, I guess the way school works here is very different, like getting into post-secondary and everything. And I was like, oh my God, like nothing's real. Like I was like, nothing exists. Like this, it's all just smoke and mirrors. Like you could pretend your kid was on a team for this thing. Like you could do so much. And I feel like that also was one of those things where I was like, wow, like, am I naive? I spent all my time on the internet, and yet this is something like I couldn't fathom actually happening. We have another question here about scam culture, and it kind of brings up like is there a new normal that the children or like the next generation will become used to as far as scam culture goes? Because I mean, like I remember a time before social media was on phones. Like I guess it's not something that I was I grew up with in that sense. So what will the future be?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're like a similar age where we were like lucky enough to live life before. We can kind of compare and contrast. For kids growing up now, like, I mean, they're growing up with the knowledge that they have to brand themselves on the internet and create this persona, you know, born into that. Like they're creating, I think they're backing off of it now, but like Mark Zuckerberg wants to create an Instagram for like under 13ers who it'll they say they're gonna have these like safety precautions on it. So like if you know you don't know them, you can't send them a friend request if you're in a it's like stuff how are you gonna enforce that? You can't even keep QAnon off your platform. But yeah, I think we're like dealing with a completely different societal structure, and we haven't really acknowledged it or talked about it that much. But sometimes I think the kids are going to be okay. You know, I see their TikToks and like the way that they are rejecting, you know, Mike Bloomberg had a paid influencer campaign and they were not having it, or, you know, the way they kind of like fought back on Donald Trump's rallies. And like, sometimes I'm like, all right, it's, you know, it's going to be fine.
Yeah. This is a very interesting question. So yeah, as your book describes, social media feels like a lawless space, kind of like the early days of TV and radio. And do you see kind of more regulations coming to social media more than what exists now? And I was actually wondering that as well, because, you know, technically you have to have spawn or, you know, that kind of thing. And I guess it's what will I guess, where do you see that going?
Well, I mean, in the US, at least right now, there's not that much that can be done. Like the government can send, you know, like a sternly worded letter essentially to an influencer who fails to label something as an ad. And they can maybe go after the company that paid the influencer for failing to, you know, meet these standards. But it's like a lot of too little too late. You know, the platforms could try to regulate it better, but there's only so much they can do. It really is like a wild west. And unfortunately, the onus is on the consumer to, you know, not take it at face value and to see through it. And so that's going to continue to end in disaster until somebody can step up and stop it, or at least clearly label what's happening.
Yeah. And we have another question here from Patty, who's on Facebook, and they're wondering, yeah, like, do all influencers just take money up front? Are there any who like, yeah, it is very mysterious to see how much an influencer is getting paid. Like, you know, you hear anything from like, this person makes $1,000 post, like sometimes you're like, oh, 150,000. And you're just kind of like, how are we supposed to know these things in a sense? So I am very curious about that.
Yeah, no, there's no real guide to it. I was always shocked by like, you know, the Kardashians, they're very good at integrating products into their content. And, you know, they cross promote each other's brands. But like, they're also selling medication. Like Khloe Kardashian has, I forget what the product is, but Kim did, you know, pregnancy nausea pills. Like they have gone, like they will sell anything as long as, you know, the copy visually looks like their other Instagram slides. And that's kind of the only requirement that they seem to have. Even like, you know, I wanted to see what it would be like to make my dog an influencer. So I signed her up for what's called a Loop campaign, which is where, you know, Scott Disick does this a lot. She was involved with one. I'd never heard of him before, but I guess I'm too old for this. A YouTuber named Zane, who had 3.5 million Instagram followers. And the way that they work is they say that if their followers, they unfollow everyone. So they only follow people on this list. So for a while, Zane was following my dog Colette. And then their followers are told that they'll be entered into a raffle to win a prize or to win money if they follow other people on this list. But what I realized in doing it is the list is constantly changing. So when I entered Colette, they guaranteed her up to 3,000 new followers. And as soon as she hit that, they took her off and they put someone else on. But for one of Zane's followers who thinks that they're complying with the rules, like you realize very quickly, like all of this is a lie. Although it was cool to have her be a little influencer for a while. Thought maybe
That
we would
is-
get up.
That is like such a wild pyramid scheme. And you're kind of like, for what? For people to follow this person and not care about them? I guess it's kind of like that whole thing of like, oh, other people care about this person. I'm going to start caring about them now.
Well, it's like, I don't know if you've seen these, but they'll post a picture of themselves with like a bunch of Louis Vuitton luggage and like, you know, some bands of $100 bills and be like, this is all for one follower, you know, just follow all these rules to enter. And like, nobody is really winning these things.
Wow, I'm no longer entering those. Imagine as someone who's like, yeah.
If Zane tells you to follow someone, don't do it.
Here's another question. I guess, what was your biggest surprise when doing research for this?
That's a good question. One of the ones that really shocked me was, it's so dumb, but I talked to a plastic surgeon who said that he and his colleagues are routinely pressured into buying and advertising products that they know don't work. But because they are marketed so well on social media, they get so many clients calling up asking for it that it's just more advantageous for them to just buy it and offer it, even though they like openly talk about how there's like no point at all. A lot of these things were like, they seem so obvious, and I'm like, what? Like, I don't know if I'm naive or what, but oh yeah.
Oh wow, that is, I mean, it's really something else. Nothing's real. Yeah, I guess, so here's one last question, I guess, before you wrap up. And so media keeps reporting intended propaganda of foreign governments on our social media. And like, is that kind of like a serious issue, I guess, when we think of, you know, social media and scammers?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's on this spectrum of everything is kind of a scam and where does it fall? But that is absolutely like I saw Scott Disick like kind of, you know, whitewashing. He was like at a conference right after the Khashoggi murder. I personally got him. Unfortunately, I was not able to do this because of timing and then COVID. But I got invited to Uzbekistan to go to an influencer like summit where basically they give you a free trip and they set up like a couple experiential things and you have to agree that you're going to post positively about it. And I could see a lot of people would end up like, why wouldn't you go on a free trip that the government is offering you? So that is definitely a thing that's happening. I don't know to what scale, but certainly, yeah. I mean, influencers are selling apartment buildings now. Like anything that can be sold, they will sell.
Wow, it kind of makes you wonder why we went into journalism. I'm like, man, if I would have just latched on to being an influencer in 2014, I could have bought a house by now.
Yeah, right.
I guess this is one last question just for me, but will there be a kind of like an influencing bubble of sorts? Because it feels like every day I go online and I see someone who has millions of followers and I've never heard of them. And I'm just, and you're just kind of like, what, to what end?
Yeah, I actually noticed that today. I ended up on someone's page who had 1.5 million followers and I had to like Google who they were. But you know, I don't think so. Like all the people that were involved in the Fyre Festival who like clearly demonstrated that they could not be like trusted, you know, to whatever degree, they're all still working. They're all still doing SpawnCon. They all still have massive followings. So, you know, I don't think that bubble is going to pop anytime soon. The influencer, you know, economy keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's a multi-billion-dollar business. You know, I wrote about this a little bit in the book, but there was a movie called The Joneses that was written before social media was a thing, about a family of really attractive models. You know, there's like a mom and a dad and two kids, and they're just dropped into random suburban neighborhoods because anytime someone is like attractive and has a nice life, people are going to want to buy what they have. And you no longer have to live in a town with them. The movie was actually based on the writer who worked in advertising, and he heard about a Campari campaign where they hired models to go to bars and just order Campari, and it worked. And so,
or just being, you mentioned just being in places that influencers would go, kind of thing. Yeah,
like they were in the Hamptons and they had bus wraps on the Hampton Jitney, that kind of thing. And now you don't even have to go into a bar, and they don't even have to look like what they say they look like. You can create these digital composites to sell your stuff, and there will be people who are inspired by it or attracted to it. So I don't think it's ever going to end.
Wow, that's great to know. So I still have time, is what you're saying. Can rebrand. Oh, well, thank you so much. This was such a great talk. And again, everyone can get hype from the library, or you can buy it. And it's very fascinating. It's something that it opened a lot of doors in my mind where I was like, but what about that? And what about that? And what about that? And I really feel like even if you're someone who's not like super online, I still think it's quite easy to follow, in the sense that, this is just the world around us at this point. But yeah, thank you so much. I really had a great time talking tonight.
Thank you so much too. And that is truly like the best compliment you can give. And I will take that out with me. I really appreciate it. And it was a real pleasure talking with you. And thank you so much to everyone here for coming to have this chat.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle and Sarah, for being with us and for sharing all this knowledge and insight and having this wonderful conversation with us. So I'm going to ask you to leave the stage now, and I'm going to do a closing remarks, but have a wonderful night. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Bye. So thank you everyone for joining tonight. And thanks to my colleague Candy in the background for helping run things smoothly, and for not panicking when my internet froze. And thank you everyone for your patience on that. If you want to watch this event again, or if you feel like you have a friend who would love to watch it, we are live streaming to Facebook. And so this event will be available on our Facebook page under the video section. So it's very easy to find. Just go to the Vancouver Public Library's Facebook page. It is streaming right now, or click on the videos part and you will find the link there after this event. Important point is that we would love it if you gave us feedback about